Alexander Reed, a tech billionaire with a fortress-like penthouse, never expected a simple disguise to transform his existence. When he posed as an Uber driver searching for genuine connection, a compassionate nurse named Lily saw through his facade. Everyone told her she was delusional. But when the truth emerged, the meaning of authenticity, trust, and true love changed everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Today, Alexander Reed surveyed Seattle's skyline from his glass-walled office on the 60th floor. At 38, he had acquired everything money could buy. A revolutionary AI security company worth billions, respect from Silicon Valley's elite, and a sprawling penthouse that showcased both his wealth and his isolation. The only thing missing was someone who cared about the man behind the empire. "Mr. Reed, your 3 o'clock strategic meeting is about to begin," his executive assistant announced through the intercom. "I'll be right there," Alexander replied, adjusting his custom-tailored suit jacket. He took one last look at the sprawling city below, a city full of people, yet he'd never felt more alone. The boardroom fell silent as Alexander entered. His executive team straightened in their chairs, eyes alert with a mixture of respect and thinly veiled apprehension. He had a reputation for brilliant strategy and uncompromising standards. "Let's discuss the Artemis merger," Alexander began without preamble, sliding into his chair at the head of the table. Marcus Chen, his CFO, launched into a detailed financial presentation. "The acquisition will increase our market share by 32% and eliminate our biggest competitor." Alexander nodded, studying the projected figures with razor-sharp focus. "And the employees?" Marcus hesitated. "We'll need to restructure. Approximately 300 positions will become redundant." 300 families, Alexander said quietly. "Sir?" "Nothing." Alexander waved a hand dismissively. "Continue." The meeting progressed with clinical efficiency. Numbers, strategies, projections, all precisely calculated for maximum profit. Yet Alexander found his attention drifting. Was this all there was? Endless acquisitions, growing a fortune he barely used, living in spaces too large for one person? After the meeting, his childhood friend and COO, James Wilson, lingered behind. "Everything all right, Alex? You seem distracted." Alexander sighed, dropping the formal facade he maintained with everyone else. "Ever feel like you're just going through motions, James? Building something without knowing why anymore?" James leaned against the conference table. "Is this about the charity gala last week? That socialite who called you delightfully robotic?" Alexander grimaced. "Cassandra Hamilton, daughter of Senator Hamilton. She spent exactly 12 minutes pretending to be interested in me before asking about investing in her friend's startup." "The curse of wealth," James said with a sympathetic smile. "Never knowing if people want you or your money." "It's not just that." Alexander moved to the window, watching tiny figures navigate the streets below. "My father built this company to protect people. Somewhere along the way, I've lost that connection. I don't know what real people even think anymore." "Real people?" James raised an eyebrow. "People who aren't trying to get something from me. People who don't know I'm Alexander Reed." A contemplative silence fell between them before James spoke again. "You know, before you inherited the company, you used to drive for that rideshare app during college. Said it was the best way to understand people." Alexander turned, a spark of interest in his eyes. "I did, didn't I?" Later that evening, alone in his penthouse, Alexander couldn't shake the conversation. He wandered through the vast space, past priceless artwork he'd purchased because his art consultant said he should, past rooms he never used, to his private study. On impulse, he opened his laptop and created a new rideshare driver account. "Michael Turner," he typed, using his middle name and his mother's maiden name. With a few clicks, he uploaded the necessary documentation using an address from one of his lesser-known properties. It was impulsive, perhaps even foolish, but something about the idea of stepping out of his isolated world appealed to him in a way nothing had for years. The next morning, Alexander informed his assistant he would be working remotely for the next few weeks. Personal project, he explained vaguely when she looked concerned. He chose a modest apartment in a middle-class neighborhood, one of many properties his real estate division managed. Selecting casual clothes that wouldn't draw attention, Alexander, now Michael, began his experiment. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. His first passenger was a young mother with a toddler, rushing to a job interview. "I'm so sorry about the car seat installation," she apologized, struggling to secure it while her daughter whimpered. "My regular sitter canceled last minute." "Let me help," Alexander offered, surprising himself with the genuine desire to assist. He secured the car seat with efficient movements, remembering how he'd once helped his sister with her children years ago, before business had consumed his life. "You're a lifesaver," the woman sighed gratefully as they finally got underway. "I'm already nervous about this interview. It would mean health insurance for Emma." Alexander listened as she talked about her hopes for the position, her daughter, her struggles as a single parent. There was no agenda in her conversation, just one human connecting with another. He found himself oddly moved by the simplicity of it. Over the next few days, Alexander, as Michael, drove dozens of passengers. College students debating philosophy, elderly couples recounting how they met, business professionals complaining about demanding bosses. Ironically, one worked for a subsidiary of his own company. For the first time in years, Alexander felt the world opening up to him. These weren't calculated interactions designed to extract something from him. They were genuine moments of human connection. On the fifth day, just as he was considering ending his evening shift, the app pinged with a new pickup request. Lily Chen, Providence Hospital. Alexander navigated to the hospital entrance, spotting a young woman in light blue scrubs, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked exhausted, with shadows under her eyes, but when she saw the car, she smiled. A genuine smile that transformed her face. "Michael?" she confirmed as she slid into the back seat. "That's me," Alexander replied, oddly drawn to the warmth in her voice. "Long shift?" 14 hours in the pediatric ICU. Lily sighed, leaning back against the seat. "But we saved a little boy today, so worth every minute." Something about her quiet certainty caught Alexander's attention. "That must be rewarding work." "It is, though today tested my patience. We had a pharmaceutical representative trying to push expensive medications when the generic versions work just as well." Her voice took on an edge of frustration. "Some corporations care more about profit margins than the families who can't afford treatment." Alexander winced inwardly, thinking of his own company's pharmaceutical division and their aggressive pricing strategies. "Sorry," Lily said, noticing his expression in the rearview mirror. "I didn't mean to dump my frustrations on you. How's your day been?" The simple question, asked with genuine interest, caught Alexander off guard. When was the last time someone had asked about his day without an ulterior motive? "Enlightening," he answered truthfully. "I'm fairly new to driving. Meeting different people has been educational." Lily laughed, a melodic sound that seemed to brighten the car's interior. "I bet you hear some stories. Probably not unlike nursing. People reveal a lot when they're in transitional spaces." Their conversation flowed effortlessly through the 30-minute ride. Lily spoke about her patients without breaking confidentiality, her passion for pediatric care evident in every word. Alexander found himself sharing more than he'd intended, talking about his own disconnection from purpose, carefully editing out details that might reveal his true identity. When they arrived at her modest apartment building, Lily hesitated before exiting the car. "You know, you're the first Uber driver who's actually listened. Most just want to tell me their life story." "Maybe I'm a good listener because I'm trying to figure some things out myself," Alexander admitted. Lily's gaze was surprisingly perceptive. "Well, Michael the philosophical Uber driver, I hope you find what you're looking for." She collected her bag and added, "I work the same shift tomorrow if you're around for a pickup." After she disappeared into her building, Alexander sat in his car, strangely reluctant to end the day. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt a genuine connection, one based on conversation rather than calculation. The next evening, Alexander found himself parked outside Providence Hospital again, waiting for Lily's shift to end. He told himself it was part of his experiment in understanding real people, but he knew there was more to it. When Lily slid into the back seat, her face brightened with recognition. "Michael? You came back." "I was in the neighborhood," he lied smoothly. "How was today's shift?" "Better than yesterday. My little patient is responding well to treatment." She studied him in the rearview mirror. "You look different when you're not exhausted." Alexander chuckled. "I could say the same about you." Their conversation resumed as if they'd known each other for years rather than one previous ride. Lily talked about growing up with immigrant parents who worked multiple jobs to give her opportunities, about her choice to become a nurse rather than pursue the medical degree her family had hoped for. "I wanted to be the person who's actually there with patients, day in and day out," she explained. "Doctors sweep in for 10 minutes. Nurses build the relationships that heal." Alexander found himself sharing more of his own carefully edited story, how his father had built a business from nothing, how he'd inherited responsibilities that sometimes felt suffocating, how he wondered if success was worth the isolation it created. "That's the thing about expectations," Lily observed thoughtfully. "They can become prisons if we're not careful. My parents wanted me to become a doctor because that's what success looked like to them. I had to find my own definition." Her words resonated deeply with Alexander. Had he been living his life according to others' definitions of success? As they reached her apartment, Lily leaned forward. "I know this might sound strange, but would you want to grab coffee sometime? When you're not driving and I'm not half dead from a shift. You're easy to talk to, and friends are hard to come by in this city." Alexander froze momentarily. This wasn't part of his plan. Getting coffee meant extending his charade, deepening a connection built on partial truths. The responsible choice would be to politely decline. "I'd like that," he heard himself say instead. They exchanged phone numbers, Alexander using the temporary number he'd established for his Michael identity, and agreed to meet at a local coffee shop on her next day off. That night, back in his modest temporary apartment, Alexander stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. What exactly was he doing? This experiment had begun as a way to reconnect with ordinary people, to remember why his father had built their security empire. It wasn't supposed to involve coffee dates with engaging nurses who thought he was someone else entirely. Yet he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward Lily. Their conversations had awakened something dormant inside him, a desire for connection based on who he was rather than what he owned. His phone buzzed with a text from James. "Board's asking questions about your absence. Need me to run interference?" Alexander sighed, worlds colliding. He typed back, "Tell them personal research project. Essential for future company direction." It wasn't entirely a lie. The more time he spent as Michael, the more he recognized how disconnected Reed Enterprises had become from the people it was supposed to protect. 3 days later, Alexander sat nervously at a corner table in Cloudbreak Coffee, a cozy neighborhood establishment far from the upscale venues he typically frequented. He'd arrived early, ordering a simple black coffee instead of his usual precisely crafted espresso. When Lily walked in, wearing jeans and a green sweater instead of scrubs, her hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders, Alexander felt an unexpected tightening in his chest. She spotted him and waved, her smile genuine and unguarded in a way he rarely encountered in his real life. "Sorry I'm late," she said, sliding into the chair opposite him. "My neighbor's daughter needed help with a science project, and I lost track of time." "No problem," Alexander replied, finding himself smiling back. "I haven't been waiting long." Their coffee stretched into lunch, and then an impromptu walk through a nearby park. Conversation flowed naturally between them, touching on books they'd read, places they'd traveled, Alexander carefully downplaying the exclusivity of his destinations, and their hopes for the future. "I want to open a pediatric clinic someday," Lily shared as they sat on a park bench, watching children play. "Something accessible to families regardless of insurance status. Healthcare shouldn't be a luxury." "That's admirable," Alexander said, thinking of the healthcare acquisitions his company had made purely for profit margins. "What's stopping you?" Lily laughed ruefully. "Oh, just the small matter of several $1 million in startup costs, plus my student loans." "Not all of us have trust funds." Alexander winced internally. "But you'll get there. You have the vision." "Maybe." Lily turned to face him, curiosity in her eyes. "What about you? You're obviously educated, thoughtful. Why drive for Uber? What's your real passion? The question hit uncomfortably close to his deception. I'm at a crossroads, he answered, sticking as close to truth as possible. I worked in corporate security technology for years, but I lost sight of the purpose behind it. This is a kind of sabbatical to figure out my next steps. Security technology? Lily's eyebrows rose. Like Reed Enterprises? My hospital just implemented their patient data protection system. Costs a fortune, but supposedly unhackable. Alexander nearly choked on his coffee. Yes, companies like that, he managed, wondering at the irony of his own products touching her life. Well, if you're good at that kind of work but want purpose, hospitals always need security consultants who actually understand patient care implications, Lily suggested. Not that I'm trying to solve your career crisis on our first, she trailed off, suddenly looking uncertain. First what? Alexander prompted, his heart racing unexpectedly. I was going to say date, but that's presumptuous, Lily admitted with endearing directness. Is that what this is? Looking into her open, expectant face, Alexander felt a wave of guilt. He was enjoying himself more than he had in years, connecting with someone who seemed to value him for his thoughts and character rather than his wealth or position. But the entire interaction was built on omission and half-truths. I'd like it to be, he said softly, making a private promise to find a way to untangle this deception before it went too far. Lily's smile could have lit up the darkening park. Good. Me too. As they walked back toward the coffee shop where Lily had parked her car, their hands brushed accidentally. Alexander found himself taking her hand in his, the simple contact sending an unexpected current through him. Would you like to have dinner next weekend? He asked as they reached her car. There's a little Italian place in Fremont that makes pasta like my grandmother used to. I'd love that, Lily replied, her eyes warm with promise. But only if you let me drive this time. You deserve a break from being behind the wheel. As Alexander watched her drive away, the weight of his deception settled uncomfortably. What had begun as an experiment in reconnection was evolving into something he hadn't anticipated. Something genuine and potentially important. Something he was jeopardizing with every moment he maintained his charade. Back in his temporary apartment, Alexander's phone rang with James's number. We have a situation, his friend said without preamble. The Artemis merger is hitting regulatory hurdles. The board wants an emergency meeting tomorrow. I can't stall him anymore, Alex. Reality crashed back. Alexander Reed couldn't simply disappear into Michael Turner's simpler life, no matter how appealing that had become. I'll be there, he promised, already calculating how to temporarily step back into his real life without ending his experiment entirely. Send the files to my secure server. Where have you been anyway? James asked, curiosity evident in his tone. This disappearing act isn't like you. Alexander thought of Lily's smile, of conversations unburdened by power dynamics or ulterior motives. Just reconnecting with what matters. He answered cryptically. I'll explain everything soon. After ending the call, Alexander stood at the window of his modest temporary home, looking out at the ordinary street below. For the first time in his adult life, he found himself wishing he truly was Michael Turner. Uber driver, with no responsibilities beyond picking up his next passenger and figuring out his future. But he wasn't. He was Alexander Reed, CEO of a multinational corporation, responsible for thousands of employees and billions in assets. A man who had created an elaborate deception to experience normalcy, and who was now entangling an innocent, genuine person in his web of half-truths. As he packed an overnight bag with his designer clothes for tomorrow's board meeting, Alexander knew he was approaching a crossroads far more significant than the career uncertainty he'd fabricated for Lily's benefit. Soon, he would need to choose return fully to the isolated privilege of his real life, or find a way to bridge his two worlds and come clean to the one person who had made him feel truly seen in years. Either way, someone was likely to get hurt. He just hoped it wouldn't be Lily. The next morning, Alexander transformed back into the billionaire CEO, trading his casual clothing for a bespoke suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He traveled to his real penthouse first, collecting necessary documents and steeling himself to step back into a world that suddenly felt foreign. Welcome back, Mr. Reed, his doorman greeted with practiced deference. Your car is waiting. The executive elevator whisked him directly to the top floor of Reed Tower. His executive assistant, Vanessa, did a double-take when he strode through the doors. Mr. Reed, we weren't expecting you in the office today. Emergency situations require flexibility, he replied with the clipped efficiency expected of him. Is everyone assembled? Yes, sir. Boardroom A. They've been waiting for 15 minutes. Alexander nodded, mentally shifting gears from Michael Turner's relaxed demeanor to the commanding presence of Alexander Reed. Let's not keep them waiting any longer. The moment he entered the boardroom, the atmosphere changed. Conversations halted, backs straightened. Faces composed themselves into masks of professional neutrality. These were people who had worked with him for years. Yet, there was a distance, a barrier of power and position that kept genuine connection at bay. Gentlemen, ladies, Alexander acknowledged, taking his position at the head of the table. I understand we have concerns about Artemis. For the next 3 hours, Alexander was fully immersed in the complex world of corporate strategy, antitrust regulations, and financial projections. The issues were substantive and required his complete attention, yet he found his thoughts occasionally drifting to his coffee with Lily, to conversations that had nothing to do with market share or quarterly projections. Your proposal is sound, he told his legal team after they presented a strategy to address the regulatory concerns. But I want to add another dimension. Prepare a report on how this merger will affect healthcare affordability for average consumers. If there are negative impacts, I want mitigation strategies. His general counsel looked confused. Sir, that's not typically part of antitrust considerations. It's part of mine, Alexander replied firmly. This company was founded on the principle of protection. That includes protecting people from unintended consequences of our business decisions. James, who had been quietly observing from the corner, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. After the meeting concluded, he followed Alexander to his private office. Healthcare affordability? That's new territory for you. Alexander gazed out at the Seattle skyline from a vantage point that made the city look like a miniature model rather than a place where real people lived complex lives. Maybe it shouldn't be. Does this sudden interest in the common man have something to do with your mysterious absence? James asked, studying his friend closely. Alexander hesitated, then decided that if he couldn't be honest with his oldest friend, he was truly lost. I've been driving for rideshare, James, using the name Michael Turner. Meeting regular people. Having conversations without the filter of wealth and position. James's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. Alex, there are safer ways to have a midlife crisis. Buy a sports car. Date a model. Don't pretend to be someone you're not. That's just it, Alexander countered. For the first time in years, I don't feel like I'm pretending. When I'm Michael, people talk to me, really talk to me, without agenda or pretense. And this enlightenment came from driving strangers around the city? James sounded skeptical. Alexander thought of Lily's directness, her passion for her patients, her unguarded smile. Among other things, James's eyes narrowed. There's someone specific, isn't there? You've met someone who doesn't know you're worth billions. Her name is Lily, Alexander admitted. She's a pediatric nurse. Compassionate, dedicated, unimpressed by status or wealth. She thinks I'm a former corporate security specialist, taking time to reevaluate my priorities. Which is technically true, James pointed out, if you remove several zeros from your net worth and the fact that you own the company. I'm going to tell her the truth, Alexander insisted. I just need to find the right moment. The longer you wait, the worse it will be, James warned. Trust me on this. Deception isn't a foundation for anything meaningful. Alexander knew his friend was right, but the thought of seeing disappointment replace warmth in Lily's eyes made his chest tighten uncomfortably. I'll handle it, he promised, hoping he could. After James left, Alexander spent several hours addressing the most urgent matters that had accumulated during his absence. When his assistant informed him that his last meeting had been rescheduled, he found himself with an unexpected free evening. On impulse, he texted Lily. Finished work earlier than expected. Any chance you're free tonight instead of this weekend? Her response came minutes later. Just getting off shift. Too exhausted for anything fancy, but you could come over for takeout and a movie if you don't mind seeing me in pajamas with wet hair. Alexander smiled at his phone, imagining Lily comfortable and unguarded in her home. It was precisely that authenticity that drew him to her. Sounds perfect. Text me your address? After she responded, he hesitated only briefly before instructing his driver to take him to his temporary apartment first. He changed from his power suit into jeans and a casual button-down, the uniform of Michael Turner rather than Alexander Reed. Standing outside Lily's modest apartment building an hour later, balancing Thai food and a bottle of wine, Alexander felt a nervousness he hadn't experienced since his first major acquisition. This wasn't a business transaction, though. This was something far more valuable and far more fragile. Lily answered the door in flannel pajama pants and a faded university sweatshirt, her damp hair twisted up in a loose knot. No makeup, no pretense, just a genuine smile that made his carefully constructed worlds collide with dizzying force. "You're a lifesaver," she said, ushering him in. "I've been dreaming about pad thai for the last 4 hours of my shift." Her apartment was small but thoughtfully arranged, with bookshelves lining one wall, colorful artwork, and comfortable mismatched furniture. It was nothing like his minimalist, designer-decorated spaces, yet it felt instantly more like a home than anywhere he lived. "This is nice," he said, meaning it. "It feels like you." Lily laughed, pulling plates from a cabinet. "Is that a polite way of saying it's chaotic and eclectic?" "It's a genuine way of saying it's warm and full of personality," Alexander corrected, setting down their dinner. "Unlike my place." "What's your place like?" Lily asked, genuinely curious as she poured the wine he'd brought into mismatched glasses. Alexander thought about his vast, pristine penthouse with its curated art collection and custom furniture that no one ever sat on. "Sterile," he admitted. "Like a museum exhibit about a person rather than where someone actually lives." Lily studied him with that perceptive gaze that made him feel simultaneously exposed and understood. "You really are at a crossroads, aren't you? Not just professionally." "In every way," he acknowledged, accepting the glass she offered. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, sending that now familiar current through him. "But tonight, I don't want to talk about my existential crisis. Tell me about your day saving tiny humans." They settled on her comfortable couch, plates balanced on their laps, as Lily shared stories about her patients. A toddler who had finally been discharged after weeks in the ICU, a teenager struggling with chronic illness who had found solace in digital art, a new diagnosis that was breaking her heart, but that she was determined to fight alongside the family. "The hardest part is when treatment options are limited by finances," she confessed, setting aside her empty plate. "We had a consult today with a family whose insurance won't cover the most effective medication for their daughter's condition. The alternative has brutal side effects, but it's all they can afford." Alexander felt a twinge of discomfort, knowing his company's healthcare subsidiaries were part of that system. "What's the condition?" he asked quietly. As Lily explained the medical details, Alexander made a mental note of the medication name and the insurance limitations. There were ways he could address this specific situation, even if the larger system remained problematic. "Enough about my work troubles," Lily said finally, tucking her feet underneath her on the couch. "How was your mysterious corporate emergency today?" Alexander chose his words carefully. "Challenging. A project I've been working on hit some obstacles. I had to remind my team why we're doing what we do, the people behind the numbers." "Sounds like your sabbatical is already changing your approach," Lily observed. "It's not the sabbatical," Alexander said before he could stop himself. "It's you." The admission hung in the air between them, more honest than he'd intended. Lily's eyes widened slightly, a flush spreading across her cheeks. "I'm just a nurse who talks too much about healthcare inequality," she deflected, though her voice had softened. "You're someone who sees people, not statistics or opportunities," Alexander corrected. "You've reminded me what that looks like." They were sitting closer now, though neither could have said who had moved. In the soft lamplight of her cozy living room, with the pretensions of status and wealth stripped away, Alexander felt a clarity he'd been missing for years. This connection, based on conversation and shared values rather than power dynamics, was what he'd been searching for without knowing it. When Lily leaned forward and gently pressed her lips to his, it felt like the most natural progression imaginable. The kiss was tentative at first, a question rather than a demand. Alexander answered by drawing her closer, his hand cradling the back of her neck with a tenderness that surprised them both. When they finally pulled apart, Lily's eyes were bright with emotion. "I don't usually kiss men I've only known for a week," she admitted with characteristic honesty. "I don't usually feel this way about anyone," Alexander responded truthfully. Time seems irrelevant. They spent the rest of the evening talking, kissing, discovering each other's stories. Alexander navigating the treacherous waters of truth and omission, sharing real aspects of his life while carefully editing out details that would reveal his true identity. It was past midnight when he reluctantly stood to leave. "I should go. You need rest after your shift." Lily walked him to the door, her hand in his. "When will I see you again?" "Tomorrow," Alexander suggested, unable to contemplate waiting longer. "I could pick you up after your shift." "I'd like that," Lily said, rising on tiptoes to kiss him once more. "Good night, Michael." The name was like a bucket of cold water, a stark reminder of his deception. As Alexander walked to his car, the warmth of their evening together battled with the growing weight of his lie. James was right. The longer he waited, the more difficult the truth would become. The next afternoon, Alexander was once again waiting outside Providence Hospital, but this time as himself, not in the guise of an Uber driver. He'd spent the morning in crucial meetings, making it clear to his executive team that he would be taking a less intensive role for the next few weeks to focus on strategic planning. "You're restructuring your priorities," James had observed with knowing eyes. "Something like that," Alexander had acknowledged. Now dressed casually but in clothes that were unmistakably expensive, he waited nervously for Lily to emerge from the hospital. He had decided to tell her everything. Who he really was, why he had created the Michael persona, how genuine his feelings had become despite the deception. He spotted her walking through the hospital doors, still in her scrubs, looking tired but satisfied after her shift. His heart raced as he stepped forward, ready to confess everything and face the consequences. But before he could reach her, a luxury SUV pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down to reveal an elegantly dressed older woman with Lily's same warm eyes. "Lily, darling," the woman called. "Surprise! Your father and I thought we'd take you to dinner since we're in town for the medical conference." Alexander froze, watching as Lily's face lit up with genuine delight. "Mom! Dad! What are you doing here?" she exclaimed, rushing to embrace her mother through the car window. The passenger door opened, and a distinguished-looking man in his 60s emerged, wrapping Lily in a warm hug. "My brilliant daughter. We've missed you." Alexander stood rooted to the spot, suddenly understanding that this was not the moment for revelations and potential heartbreak. Lily deserved her happiness with her parents without the complication of discovering. The man she was beginning to care for had been lying to her from the start. He was about to retreat when Lily spotted him. "Michael," she called, waving him over with an open smile that made his chest ache. "Come meet my parents." Trapped, Alexander approached the family group, his mind racing. This was not how he had planned to handle things, but there was no graceful escape. "Mom, Dad, this is Michael." Lily introduced him with a warmth that only intensified his guilt. She hesitated, clearly unsure how to define their new relationship. "A friend," Alexander supplied, extending his hand to her father. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Chen." The older man raised an eyebrow, clearly assessing the man his daughter had introduced. "Michael." "Turner," Alexander provided smoothly. "I understand you're here for a medical conference?" "The International Symposium on Pediatric Innovations," Dr. Chen confirmed. "I'm presenting research on childhood cancer treatments. Are you in the medical field as well?" "Technology security," Alexander replied, sticking to his established cover story while desperately seeking an exit strategy. "Nothing as meaningful as your family's work." Mrs. Chen studied him with the same perceptive gaze her daughter possessed. "Lily mentioned she'd met someone interesting." She didn't say how handsome he was. "Mother," Lily protested, blushing. "Why don't you join us for dinner, Michael?" Mrs. Chen suggested. "We're going to Aquaviva. I'm sure they can accommodate another guest." Alexander recognized the name of one of Seattle's most exclusive restaurants, one where he was well known as a regular patron. The risk of being recognized was too high. "That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to intrude on your family reunion," he demurred. Perhaps another time? Disappointment flickered across Lily's face, but she recovered quickly. Michael probably has plans already, Mom. We didn't know you were coming. Actually, Alexander improvised, I have a work emergency I need to handle. Client security breach. He directed his gaze to Lily. Rain check? Of course, she said, though he could see questions forming behind her eyes. I'll text you later. Please do, he replied, meaning it despite his relief at escaping a potentially disastrous dinner. It was wonderful meeting you both, he added to her parents with genuine respect. As he walked away, he heard Mrs. Chen say, He seems nice, Lily. What did you say he does again? Alexander didn't wait to hear Lily's response. He needed space to think, to strategize. The encounter with her parents had made the abstract concept of telling the truth concrete and complicated. These were accomplished medical professionals who had raised their daughter with values of honesty and service. How would they react to learning their daughter was involved with someone who had been deceiving her, regardless of his intentions? More importantly, how would Lily herself respond? Back in his temporary apartment, Alexander paced restlessly. His phone buzzed with a text from Lily. Missed you at dinner. Parents are staying through the weekend. Sunday brunch before they leave? They want to get to know you better? The thought of an extended interaction with Lily's parents while maintaining his charade made his stomach clench. Yet the alternative, telling Lily the truth before Sunday, might mean she would face her parents' departure while processing a painful revelation. He texted back, Would love to. Hope you're enjoying your time with them. Setting down his phone, Alexander made a decision. He would maintain the Michael persona through the weekend, giving Lily uninterrupted time with her parents. But immediately afterward, he would come clean about everything: his identity, his company, his initial motives, and how genuinely his feelings had evolved. The next morning, Alexander was in his Reed Enterprises office before dawn, determined to compress a week's worth of CEO responsibilities into a few hours. He reviewed contracts, approved strategies, and delegated decisions with unusual efficiency. You're a man on a mission, James observed, leaning against the doorframe of Alexander's office. Does this have anything to do with your nurse? I'm having brunch with her and her parents on Sunday, Alexander admitted. As Michael. James winced. Meeting the parents under a false identity? That's a bold strategy. It's temporary, Alexander insisted. I'm telling her everything next week. I just don't want to ruin her time with her family. Noble, James acknowledged, but risky. The longer this goes on. I know, Alexander cut him off. Believe me, I know. What he didn't say was how the weight of his deception grew heavier with each genuine moment he shared with Lily. Last night, she had texted him a photo of herself with her parents at dinner, her smile radiant with happiness. Wish you were here, she'd written. He'd stared at that message for a long time, wishing the same thing, but knowing his presence would have inevitably led to exposure. The truth was becoming unavoidable. Alexander had entered into his Michael experiment seeking authentic connection, and he had found it. But authentic connection couldn't coexist with fundamental dishonesty, no matter how well-intentioned. As he wrapped up his work, preparing to return to his temporary identity as Michael for the weekend, Alexander made another impulsive decision. Opening his laptop, he accessed the company's healthcare subsidiary databases, searching for the specific medication Lily had mentioned for her patient. Within an hour, he had drafted a new policy directive regarding compassionate access programs for children with rare conditions, focusing specifically on the medication in question. It wouldn't solve the systemic problems, but it would help the specific family Lily cared about, along with others in similar situations. Implement this immediately, he instructed the subsidiary's director via email. Consider it a pilot program with potential for expansion. It was a small step, but it felt right, using his position to address a real need he would never have known about without his connection to Lily. Whatever happened when he revealed his true identity, at least this good would come from their relationship. Sunday arrived with clear skies, and Alexander's nerves stretched to breaking point. He dressed carefully, not in the power suits of Alexander Reed, but not in the overly casual clothes of Michael Turner either. He selected items that represented the middle ground he hoped to occupy after his revelation. A man of means who hadn't forgotten the value of authenticity. The brunch venue was an upscale but unpretentious restaurant overlooking Puget Sound, elegant enough to honor the occasion of meeting Lily's parents properly, but not so exclusive that he risked immediate recognition. Lily was already there when he arrived, seated with her parents at a window table. She waved when she saw him, her smile so genuinely happy to see him that Alexander's step faltered. In that moment, he almost turned around, unwilling to risk losing that unguarded warmth. But he continued forward, reminding himself that relationships built on deception were destined to crumble, no matter how solid they might temporarily appear. "Michael," Lily greeted him, standing to press a quick kiss to his cheek. "I saved you a seat next to me. Thank you for including me," Alexander said to her parents, shaking Dr. Chen's hand and accepting Mrs. Chen's warm greeting. As they settled into conversation over mimosas and coffee, Alexander found himself genuinely enjoying the Chen's company. They were brilliant, compassionate people who clearly adored their daughter and were interested in the world beyond their specific expertise, much like Lily herself. "So, Michael," Dr. Chen said after they had ordered their meals, "Lily tells us you're at a professional crossroads, reevaluating your path in corporate security?" "That's right," Alexander confirmed, staying as close to truth as his charade allowed. "I've been successful by conventional metrics, but lately I've been questioning whether success and meaning are the same thing." Mrs. Chen nodded approvingly. "An important distinction. We always taught Lily that purpose should drive ambition, not the other way around." "A lesson I'm learning rather late," Alexander acknowledged. The conversation flowed easily through their meal, touching on healthcare challenges, technology ethics, and personal stories. Alexander found himself sharing more genuine aspects of his childhood and values than he had with anyone in years, carefully editing only the details that would expose his true identity. "You remind me of someone," Dr. Chen said suddenly, studying Alexander with a thoughtful expression. "I can't quite place it." Alexander's heart rate accelerated. Had the prominent physician encountered him at some medical fundraiser or technology conference? "I have one of those faces," he deflected with a practiced smile. Dr. Chen seemed unconvinced but didn't pursue it. As they finished their meal, Mrs. Chen excused herself to use the restroom, and Dr. Chen stepped outside to take a call from a colleague, leaving Alexander alone with Lily for the first time that day. "They like you," she said, her eyes warm as she squeezed his hand under the table. "My dad doesn't usually warm up to people I date this quickly." "Is that what we're doing?" Alexander asked softly. "Dating?" Lily's directness didn't fail her. "Isn't it? Unless dinner, multiple conversations until midnight, and that kiss were just friendly gestures in your world." Alexander laughed, despite his inner turmoil. "Definitely not just friendly," he assured her, bringing her hand to his lips briefly. "I just didn't want to presume." "I don't kiss just anyone, Michael," Lily said, her expression growing more serious. "I don't have time for games or uncertainty. When I connect with someone, it means something to me." The weight of her sincerity pressed against his conscience like a physical force. "It means something to me, too," he said quietly. "More than you know." Their moment was interrupted by Mrs. Chen's return. "Such a lovely brunch," she declared. "Michael, we must do this again, next time we're in town." "I'd like that," Alexander replied, meaning it, despite knowing that the next interaction, if there was one, would be with a very different understanding of who he was. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Chen returned from his call with a strange expression. "Michael," he said slowly, "what did you say your last name was again?" "Turner," Alexander supplied, a prickle of unease running down his spine. Dr. Chen nodded, his expression unreadable. "Interesting. My colleague just mentioned meeting with Alexander Reed about a new compassionate access program for pediatric medications, specifically the one Lily was concerned about for her patient. Quite a coincidence." Alexander felt the blood drain from his face. "That is a remarkable coincidence," he managed, keeping his voice steady despite the rising panic in his chest. "I'm glad to hear someone is addressing those issues." Dr. Chen continued to study him with a clinical gaze that seemed to peel away his carefully constructed facade. "Indeed. My colleague mentioned that Reed has been behaving rather uncharacteristically lately, making decisions based on individual patient stories rather than just profit margins. Quite the evolution for a man known primarily for his business acumen." Lily glanced between her father and Alexander, confusion evident in her expression. "Dad, what are you getting at?" Mrs. Chen placed a gentle hand on her husband's arm. "John, I'm sure Michael is fascinated by healthcare policy changes, but we should get going if we're going to make our flight." The moment of tension passed as they all moved toward the exit. But Alexander could feel Dr. Chen's analytical gaze tracking him, connecting dots that were never meant to be connected so soon. Outside the restaurant, they said their goodbyes with warmth that felt surreal given Alexander's internal turmoil. Lily's parents embraced him as if he might someday become part of their family, a possibility that now seemed to be slipping through his fingers with each passing moment. "We'll see you again soon, I hope," Mrs. Chen said, hugging him with genuine affection. Dr. Chen's handshake was firm, his eyes knowing. "I look forward to getting to know you better, Michael. Or whoever you might be." The pointed comment wasn't lost on Alexander, but Lily seemed to interpret it as her father's typical protective instinct. "Dad, stop intimidating him," she laughed, linking her arm through Alexander's. After her parents departed for the airport in their hired car, Lily turned to Alexander with a smile that made his heart ache. "That went well, I think. Sorry about my dad's weird moment at the end. He gets suspicious of everyone I date." Alexander knew this was his moment. Standing on the sidewalk in the gentle spring sunshine, with Lily looking up at him with trust and growing affection, he needed to tell her everything. The words formed in his mind. "Lily, there's something I need to tell you. I'm not who you think I am." But before he could speak, Lily's phone rang with the distinctive tone she used for the hospital. Her expression immediately shifted to professional concern as she answered, "Dr. Ramirez, what's happened?" Alexander watched her face transform as she listened, her features sharpening with focus and determination. "Yes, I can come in right away. Tell them I'll be there in 20 minutes. Start the protocol we discussed yesterday." She ended the call and turned to Alexander, genuine regret in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, but I have to go. One of my critical patients has taken a turn. The family is asking for me specifically." "Of course," Alexander said immediately, silencing the selfish part of him that wanted to hold her there, to unburden his conscience before he lost his nerve. "Your patients need you." "Rain check on the rest of our day?" Lily asked, already shifting into a mindset focused on the child who needed her. "Absolutely," Alexander assured her, knowing the conversation they needed to have would require uninterrupted time and careful handling. "Go save lives. It's what you do best." Lily rose on tiptoes to kiss him quickly. "You're amazing. Thank you for understanding. I'll call you when things stabilize." As she hurried toward the hospital, Alexander stood, watching her retreating figure, the weight of his unspoken confession like a stone in his chest. The universe had granted him a temporary reprieve, but Dr. Chen's pointed comments had made it clear time was running out on his charade. Back in his temporary apartment, Alexander paced restlessly, mentally rehearsing different ways to tell Lily the truth. Should he invite her to his actual penthouse, revealing his wealth and position all at once? Should he meet her as Michael one last time and gradually explain his deception? Neither approach seemed adequate for the magnitude of what he needed to confess. His phone buzzed with a message from James. "Board meeting tomorrow at 9. Artemis team has a new proposal. Need you there." The dual life he'd been leading was becoming unsustainable. Alexander Reed couldn't keep disappearing from his responsibilities, and Michael Turner had never been more than a temporary identity, a way to step outside privilege and power to remember what genuine connection felt like. He had found that connection with Lily, but it had come at the cost of honesty. Now he had to determine whether what they'd built could survive the truth. Several hours later, his phone lit up with a message from Lily. "Finally stable. Exhausted but wanted to say goodnight. Thinking of you." Something in the simple sincerity of her text solidified Alexander's resolve. Lily deserved the complete truth, delivered with the same directness and respect she had always shown him. He texted back, "Glad your patient is stable. Can we meet tomorrow evening? There's something important I need to talk to you about." Her response came quickly. "Sounds serious. Everything okay?" "Everything's complicated," he replied honestly, "but I value what's developing between us too much to not be completely honest with you." After a brief pause, she responded, "Now I'm intrigued. 7 p.m. at my place? I'll cook." "Perfect," Alexander confirmed, both dreading and relieved that the moment of truth had a definite time and place. The next day moved with excruciating slowness. The board meeting that would normally have commanded his full attention became background noise to his internal rehearsal of what he would say to Lily. How did one explain to a person of integrity that their entire relationship had been built on a foundation of lies? Alex, your thoughts on the revised offer? James's voice cut through his distraction. Alexander refocused on the matter at hand. The acquisition that had once seemed so crucial, but now felt like a small piece in a much larger picture. The terms are improved, but I'm still concerned about the human impact. 300 jobs, families affected, potential increases in healthcare costs for vulnerable populations. The board members exchanged glances. This was not the Alexander Reed they were accustomed to. The ruthlessly efficient CEO who prioritized strategic advantage and shareholder value above softer considerations. We can include severance packages, the CFO offered tentatively. That's a start, Alexander acknowledged. But I want more. Retraining programs, placement services, extended benefits for affected families, and a guarantee that critical medications won't see price increases for at least 3 years. That will significantly impact the projected profit margins, the CFO pointed out. Yes, Alexander agreed unapologetically. It will, and will still be profitable, just not obscenely so at the expense of people's well-being. The stunned silence that followed was broken by James's supportive voice. I think what Alex is suggesting aligns with our founder's original vision. Protection extends beyond security systems to economic security for those affected by our decisions. Alexander shot his friend a grateful look. Exactly. Prepare a revised proposal with these considerations included. We'll reconvene next week. As the board members filed out, some looking concerned about this apparent shift in corporate philosophy, James lingered behind. That was quite a performance, he observed. The board thinks you've either found religion or lost your mind. Alexander managed a wry smile. Maybe a bit of both, or maybe I've just remembered what matters. Your nurse's influence, James surmised. Lily has reminded me what it means to serve others rather than just accumulate power, Alexander acknowledged. But this isn't just about her. It's about who I want to be, who I should have been all along. James studied his friend thoughtfully. You're telling her tonight? Alexander nodded, checking his watch. He had just enough time to return to his temporary apartment, change into Michael's clothes, and meet Lily at her place by 7. Wish me luck. You'll need more than luck, James said bluntly. But for what it's worth, I think she'll be angry at first. But if what you've told me about her is true, she'll eventually understand why you did it. I hope you're right, Alexander replied, not entirely convinced. At precisely 7 o'clock, Alexander knocked on Lily's apartment door, his heart hammering against his ribs like he was a teenager on his first date, rather than a billionaire CEO who regularly negotiated multi-million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. Lily opened the door with a smile that faltered slightly when she saw his expression. You look like you're about to face a firing squad, she observed, inviting him in with a gesture. Is everything okay? The apartment smelled of garlic and herbs, a pot simmering on the stove, and the table set for 2 with mismatched dishes that somehow looked perfect together, just like everything else in Lily's honest, unpretentious life. I need to tell you something, Alexander began, remaining standing even as Lily tried to usher him to the table. And I need you to hear me out completely before you respond. Lily's expression grew serious as she registered his tone. Okay, now you're scaring me a little. Are you married? Terminally ill? A secret agent? Despite his anxiety, Alexander couldn't help a small smile at her attempt to lighten the mood. Nothing quite that dramatic, but significant nonetheless. He took a deep breath. My name isn't Michael Turner, it's Alexander Reed. Lily's brow furrowed in confusion. As in, Reed Enterprises? The security technology company? Yes, Alexander confirmed, watching her expression carefully. I'm the CEO and majority shareholder. Lily sank slowly onto one of her kitchen chairs, processing this information. Why would you pretend to be someone else? Why would a billionaire pose as an Uber driver? Because I wanted to experience genuine connection, Alexander explained, the words he'd rehearsed all day finally finding voice. In my world, people approach me with agendas. They want funding, influence, status by association. I haven't had a real conversation with someone who didn't know my net worth in years. So I was... what? A social experiment? Lily's voice had an edge he hadn't heard before. Initially, perhaps, Alexander admitted, knowing complete honesty was his only path forward. I started driving for rideshare on a whim, after a conversation with James about how disconnected I'd become from the real world. I never expected to meet someone like you, someone who would make me question everything about how I've been living my life. Lily stood abruptly, moving to the stove to turn off the burner under her now-forgotten dinner. When were you planning to tell me the truth? After we slept together? After I fell in love with you? Or was this always meant to be temporary? A little vacation from your privileged life? The hurt in her voice cut Alexander more deeply than he'd anticipated. I was going to tell you today, after brunch with your parents. That's why I asked to meet. But then you got called to the hospital. My father suspected, didn't he? Lily realized suddenly. That comment about Alexander Reed and the medication program. He was testing you. Alexander nodded. I think he recognized me, or at least had his suspicions. The timing of that new program wasn't coincidental. After you told me about your patient's family struggling to afford the medication, I initiated changes in our healthcare subsidiaries' policies. Lily stared at him, her expression a complex mixture of anger, confusion, and something else he couldn't quite identify. So you used your position to help my patient, a child you've never met, while continuing to lie to my face? It sounds contradictory when you put it that way, Alexander acknowledged. But meeting you has changed how I see my responsibilities. You've reminded me that power should be used to protect people, not just accumulate more wealth and influence. Don't put this on me, Lily said sharply. I didn't ask to be your moral awakening, Alexander. The name sounded strange on her lips, a stranger's name rather than the man she'd been growing close to. You're right, he conceded immediately. My choices are my own, but I need you to know that while my identity was a lie, my feelings for you are completely genuine. The conversations we've had, the connection we've formed, that's more real than anything in my actual life. Lily crossed her arms, creating a physical barrier between them. Do you have any idea how this makes me feel? I opened up to you, shared my life, my family, my hopes and fears, all while you calculated exactly how much of yourself to reveal. It wasn't like that, Alexander protested. Though he knew from her perspective, it must seem exactly like that. I shared more of my true self with you than I have with anyone in years. The only things I concealed were my name and financial status. Those aren't small details, Lily exclaimed. They're fundamental to who you are and the choices available to you. Do you know what it's like to worry about student loans? To budget for groceries? To live in a world where one medical emergency could wipe out your savings? No, Alexander admitted quietly. I don't. And that's precisely why I needed to step outside my privileged bubble, to remember that most people live with constraints and challenges I never have to consider. And I was just convenient for that revelation? The hurt in her voice was palpable. You were unexpected, Alexander corrected gently. The most genuine, compassionate person I've encountered in longer than I can remember. Someone who made me want to be worthy of the way you look at me, not as a billionaire or a powerful CEO, but as a human being trying to figure out what matters. Lily turned away, bracing her hands against the kitchen counter. I need you to leave, she said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. I need time to process all of this. Alexander had anticipated anger, disappointment, even outright rejection, but the quiet pain in her request was somehow worse than any of those reactions. I understand, he said softly. For what it's worth, I'm sorry for the deception, but not for getting to know you. Meeting you has changed me, Lily. She didn't turn around. Please go. Alexander moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. When you're ready, if you're ever ready to talk again, I'll be here. The real me this time. Only after the door closed behind him did Lily allow the tears to fall. Tears of anger and confusion, but also of loss, because despite the lie at its foundation, what she'd felt developing between them had seemed so genuine, so full of promise. Now she was left questioning whether any of it had been real, or if she'd simply been a temporary diversion for a bored billionaire. Alexander walked blindly through the city streets, unable to face returning to either of his residences. The pain in Lily's eyes haunted him with each step. He had known his revelation would hurt her, but witnessing that hurt firsthand had been far worse than he'd imagined. His phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from James and his executive team, but he ignored them all. For the first time in his adult life, Alexander Reed was experiencing what it felt like to prioritize personal matters over business concerns, and to face the consequences of choices made for emotional rather than strategic reasons. Eventually, he found himself at a small public park, sitting on a bench overlooking the water. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have seemed beautiful under any other circumstances. "Is this seat taken?" a familiar voice asked. Alexander looked up in shock to find Dr. Chen standing beside the bench, his expression unreadable in the fading light. "Dr. Chen," Alexander managed, too surprised to say more. "I thought I might find you wandering somewhere contemplative," the older man said, sitting down without waiting for an invitation. "My flight was delayed and I had a hunch today might be the day of revelations." Alexander stared at him in confusion. "How did you find me?" Dr. Chen smiled slightly. "I didn't. Not specifically. But I've been walking the waterfront parks for the past hour, looking for a man who might be experiencing an existential crisis. You have that look about you." Despite everything, Alexander found himself appreciating the older man's perceptiveness. "I told Lily the truth," he said simply. "I gathered as much when she called her mother in tears an hour ago," Dr. Chen replied, his voice neutral rather than accusatory. "She's hurt and confused." "I never meant to hurt her," Alexander said quietly. "That was the last thing I wanted." "Intentions rarely align perfectly with outcomes," Dr. Chen observed. "Especially when deception is involved." Alexander looked at the distinguished physician directly. "You knew who I was at brunch, didn't you?" "I suspected." Dr. Chen confirmed. "When my colleague mentioned Alexander Reed's sudden interest in compassionate care programs for the specific medication Lily had been concerned about, that was too specific to be coincidental. Then I studied your face more carefully and recognized you from a medical technology fundraiser last year. You gave a speech about security innovations in healthcare." "Why didn't you say anything?" Alexander asked. Dr. Chen gazed out at the water, gathering his thoughts. "I was curious about your motives. A man in your position, pretending to be an ordinary person, dating my daughter under false pretenses. It could have been predatory, manipulative. But watching you with Lily, seeing how you looked at her, listened to her, that seemed genuine." "It was," Alexander affirmed. "Everything except my name and financial status was real. The connection we formed, the values we shared, the feelings that developed, all of that was true." "Then why the deception?" Dr. Chen asked, though his tone suggested he already had theories. Alexander sighed deeply. "Have you ever felt trapped by other people's perceptions of you? By the role you've been assigned in the world?" The doctor nodded thoughtfully. "When I first came to America as a young physician, people made assumptions based on my accent, my heritage. Some expected less of me, others expected impossible perfection. Neither saw me as simply a doctor trying to help patients." "That's it exactly," Alexander said, surprised by the understanding. "Everyone who approaches Alexander Reed wants something. Influence, money, status. No one sees the person behind the position. When I created Michael Turner, it was just to experience normal human interaction again. I never expected to meet someone like Lily, someone who would make me want to be better than I've been." Dr. Chen was silent for a moment, considering Alexander's words. "My daughter has an extraordinary capacity for compassion," he said finally. "It's what makes her an exceptional nurse. But that same quality leaves her vulnerable to disappointment when people fail to meet her standards of honesty and integrity. I've ruined any chance with her, haven't I?" Alexander asked, the pain of that reality settling into his chest. "That's not for me to say," Dr. Chen replied. "But I will offer this observation. Lily values authenticity above almost everything else. If you want any hope of repairing this breach of trust, you need to be more honest with her than you've ever been with anyone, including yourself." Alexander looked at the older man with newfound respect. "Why are you even talking to me? Shouldn't you be furious that I deceived your daughter?" "Oh, I'm not pleased," Dr. Chen assured him with a small smile. but I'm old enough to recognize that good people sometimes make poor choices for understandable reasons. The question is whether they learn from those mistakes and work to repair the damage they've caused. He stood, straightening his jacket. My rescheduled flight leaves in 2 hours. I should go meet my wife at the hotel. Thank you, Alexander said, meaning it, for the perspective, and for not immediately writing me off as a manipulative billionaire playing games with your daughter's feelings. Don't mistake understanding for approval, Dr. Chen cautioned. What happens next depends entirely on whether your actions align with your proclaimed good intentions. He paused, then added, And Alexander, if you hurt my daughter again, all the security technology in the world won't protect you from a father's disappointment. With that gentle but unmistakable warning, Dr. Chen walked away, leaving Alexander alone with his thoughts and the fading light of day. For the first time in his life, Alexander Reed found himself facing a problem that couldn't be solved with money, influence, or strategic maneuvering. The only currency that mattered now was honesty, and a willingness to be vulnerable in ways he'd spent a lifetime avoiding. As darkness settled over the city, Alexander made a decision. If there was any hope of earning back Lily's trust, he would need to demonstrate through actions, not just words, that his feelings were genuine and his commitment to change was real. The question was whether Lily would ever give him the opportunity to prove it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.